Good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are. And thank you so much for joining AFRAA Skyconnect today. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your time to join us today. And today we're tackling a very important subject. This is safety in the African aviation context. Ladies and gentlemen, today my guest would be Dr. Hassan Shahidi. He is the founder and CEO of Flight Safety Foundation. As founder and president, actually. And my second guest is Captain Haig Anyonyi. He is a captain with Kenya Airways, but also chair of the AFRAA Safety Group. Ladies and gentlemen, as in previous sessions, we would encourage your active participation and listening. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please do use our Q&A tab. Alternatively, if you want to make a comment on the discussions on the show, please use the chat box. Intermittently, I will review your comments and questions and together with our guest, and they would give you feedback, time permitting. We have 1 hour for this discussion, and I look forward to very exciting discussions on safety in Africa, and I bet you will not regret for joining today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome my two guests today to this function, and I would want to take turns to get my guests to probably do a better introduction than I have just done of themselves and what they do in their organizations before we get started. So starting off, can I have Captain Haig? Can you please introduce yourself, please?
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our viewers. It's exciting to be here to talk about something that's dear to me, which is safety. Like Raphael has said, I'm a captain in Kenya Airways. I fly the Boeing 737. I've been a pilot for the last 22 years, so I know a bit about aviation. And about 5 years ago, I started a journey in safety and quality compliance, as we know it. So currently, I serve as the Director of Corporate Quality and Safety at Kenya Airways, overseeing that the airline is running in a safe, efficient, and compliant manner. And it's an exciting journey. It's a journey that requires me to be very passionate about it. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain, for those brief words. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, who else should have been on this show, either than someone who in the last couple of years have actually taken time to get into the nitty-gritties of safety and quality. So we have the right man on the job. Let's listen to Dr. Hassan. Dr. Hassan, yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Raphael, and greetings, everybody. And thank you, AFRAA, for the invitation to be on this panel and discussion on the very important topic of safety. Hassan Shahidi with the Flight Safety Foundation. As Raphael said, I'm the president and CEO of the Flight Safety Foundation, which is an international nonprofit and independent organization with mission, and it's a single mission, to advance global aviation safety. And Captain Haig talked about the journey, and the foundation has been a journey for 80 years since inception, and it engages in different regions around the world to promote aviation safety, including Africa. And of course, we've had a wonderful partnership with AFRAA, as well as with aviation authorities in the continent for many years. And we're focused on many different areas, including safety management systems, safety information sharing, safety culture, And we will talk about some of these today, I hope. And we're really grateful for the partnership, and I'm so thrilled to be here today.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You can see we got the two men who are right for this topic, and so sit back, relax, and listen to my audience. Let's start off here. Dr. Hassan, if I can start with you, why is safety such an important thing in the aviation industry?
Well, thank you. Yes, this is a very important question, a good question. And I think that safety, really, when we think about it, is the foundation upon which we're building a sustainable and thriving aviation industry, and in particular in Africa, with the future being bright for aviation. And it plays a vital role, of course, in connecting communities, supporting trade, boosting tourism, driving economic development, and of course, a strong safety culture, and Captain Haig mentioned it, is not just, it's not optional, it's absolutely important. And it really is about protecting lives of passenger and crew members and airport workers. It's about building trust, with the reputation of safety being so important and essential in attracting tourism investment, new airline routes perhaps across the continent. It drives operational efficiency. You know, Captain Haig will probably agree that safe operations are efficient operations, you know, reducing incidents, like runway incursions, really cuts costs and disruptions. And ultimately, safety enables growth. As Africa skies become busier, especially with SATM, a strong safety culture will be very important for growth, and does not come at an expense of human lives or economic stability. So championing safety together is going to be very important, and I hope we have some more conversations on this.
Okay, thank you for that. Captain, if I can come to you. So safety is the foundation we hear on which aviation actually stands or takes roots. Now, if you look at the African context, and especially the industry is still growing. Currently, we are told that just about 10% of the 1.5 billion people on this continent currently travel by air. And this is forecast to grow exponentially in the years ahead. The African Union has actually launched a flagship project called the Single African Air Transport Market. Dr. Hassan alluded to it. And SATM is actually intended to remove the bottlenecks and allow aviation to take its proper space. So how do you see the growing traffic and the safety situation on the continent? Captain.
All right, thank you, Raphael. Just to jump on the first question around what does safety mean, I think at Kenya Airways, we say safety is our license to operate. So for everyone to be...
Sorry, can you take that again? Safety is?
Our license to operate.
License to operate, great, I like that.
Yes, so for anyone to be in the air and for you to have that license and to continue having that license, without safety, then there's no other license. Without safety, then there's no backbone to having the culture of starting an airline, getting the air and landing and getting passengers from point A to point B. Back to your second question around growth in Africa, I would possibly say that it's a concern, because when you look at the potential growth for aviation in Africa, it is huge. So you said 10% are the ones flying. We still have another 90%. If we were to grow 50% in the next 5 years, the question is then, do we have the manpower? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the culture embedded in ourselves to enable that growth? because if those two do not grow in tandem, it's a recipe for disaster. So it is important that at the forefront of having this conversation around SATAM and growth in Africa, then it is important that we have a conversation, and a very candid conversation at that, around safety. That way, safety is not just a box to check, but it is a mindset to nurture. So every improvement that we make in safety in Africa is a step towards unlocking trade, tourism, connectivity, and the two cannot be separated. It's one and the other. The two have to go hand in hand to ensure that Africa's growth is enabled. Now, the situation in Africa is not ideal. Of course, we know that we have a lot of room to improve. And the best bit about it is that the data exists. Foundations like FSF, through Dr. Hassan, giving us the data. IATA is giving us the data. So we know where we are. We do have targets to meet. And with that base of knowing where we are, the only way is up. So we can make incremental steps to grow and claw back our territory when it comes to safety performance in Africa.
Thank you, Captain. Now, we know where we are indeed, and when you listen to different reports on safety on the continent, it often becomes difficult for you to tell whether the glass is half full or half empty. So, Captain, tell me, what do you think? Is the glass half full or is it half empty? Where are we as a region on safety?
I did have this debate with the IATA team, and it looks like a lot of times when the statistics come out on Africa, it's always a very dire situation. The graph will always be red and the trend will always be in the negative. However, in Africa, we do know that we have airlines, we have ground handlers, we do have maintenance repair organizations that are actually taking safety seriously. So there's a great story to tell for Africa. The glass is almost full, not half full or empty. It's just that we need to affirm ourselves with what we're already doing. We have great safety minds in Africa who, if I could say, these are the same people who leave Africa to go and work at organizations outside Africa, which means that the capacity exists, the latitude that the personnel who leave Africa to go to other continents actually is there. So we have a very good thing going for us. I think Africa as a continent is very resilient in its basic nature. We are very hardworking. And if we put all our efforts in everything that we do and put that energy in safety, then the glass is almost full.
Wow. Dr. Hassan, do you agree that the glass is nearly full and not half empty?
Maybe I can offer that perhaps the glass is flowing. I think the future is bright. There is no region around the world that does not have challenges, and each region is unique. Africa is unique because it has certain unique situations, but there's been some significant really improvements over the years. You know, Raphael, the Flight Safety Foundation and AFRAA had a study that we did a few years ago about safety management systems in Africa. And that assessment showed that actually the African airlines are really doing well in terms of their safety management systems and the safety mindset, as Captain Haig mentioned. So there is some significant, I think, improvements and safety culture already. And of course, as we know, safety is a journey, not a destination, and there's always room for improvement. That said, I think there are some things that we need to just be mindful of. The Abuja safety targets aim to reduce the accident rates in Africa to 2.5 per million departures. And, you know, we've had much progress over the years. with reductions in certain types of accidents. But again, challenges do remain, and we are working together with industry and aviation authorities and airlines to continue to try to reach that plan. And of course, we can talk about the AFI plan a little bit more, but there are plans in place, there are targets in place, and continued collaboration is going to be necessary to continue to achieve those targets.
In fact, Dr. Hassan, before we talk about the plans and what we are doing, you said the SMS study that you jointly did, Flight Safety Foundation jointly did with AFRAA, it showed significant improvements with airlines. But you know, in the aviation space, safety is not only about the operators, it's also about the other players in the value chain. So can we say the same for the entire industry? Are we all moving together at the same pace, or the airlines are ahead, others are behind? What is the situation like?
I think with respect to the continent, I think it's a mix of different issues and different parts of the continent. There are certain parts that certainly there is a more gap between what the airlines are doing and the regulators and other authorities in those regions. And I think there's more work to be done there. In other regions, there is absolutely alignment and really a strong collaboration. So I don't think we can have a broad brush characterization. I think it's important to focus on different parts of the continent and where the needs are and where collaboration is going to be important to make sure that we continue to have strong authorities that are working and having good oversight, as well as airlines that have good management systems, as well as airports that are doing their part. It's a team sport. We need air navigation service providers, we need airports, we need regulators, and we need operators to be working together. And I believe that there is absolutely opportunity for more of that in Africa as we move forward.
In fact, the ICAO safety reports always go into a bit more detail and talk specifically about regions and countries and ratings as far as this is concerned. And looking at those reports, you will see that some countries in Africa are doing, in some cases, much better than some of the biggest aviation regions on this continent or in the world. But we also have situations where some on the continent are actually doing pretty poor. So what is accounting for this?
Who do you want?
You can go ahead, give it a first shot, and then Captain will come in.
Yes, as you mentioned, Raphael, the ICAO safety report does point to the accident rate actually improving in Africa. That it's like 1.8 per million departures, and previous years it was more around 2. So I would just say there has been improvements, significant improvements overall in the continent. Now, as I mentioned, with respect to areas where there is more opportunity, I think it's going to be on the civil aviation authorities' ability to keep up with the growth in some of these countries, and more, I would say, stronger oversight and having the personnel, the capacity, the training that's necessary to provide that oversight. So I think there's opportunity, and we'll talk hopefully about no country left behind, but the idea of capacity building and training is going to be important. And so I would just say those are some opportunities there.
So Captain, if you can also touch on that, but look at it from this angle. If you look at the traffic distribution on the continent, some of the countries have very, very, very small amounts of traffic flowing through their borders. And in terms of actually revenue generating capacity or cost recovery in terms of investments into the entire aviation system, it's a challenge. Could that be accounting for some of the drawbacks we are seeing?
I think so. And unfortunately, the safety report will usually paint Africa very broadly. There's an attempt to look at WACAF and ISAF separately. And when you look at those, then you start to see some differences in how those two particular regions is performing when it comes to safety. And that just shows you that in the WACAF region, for example, then there's a bit more traffic flowing in that particular area vis-a-vis what we have in other parts of Africa. So it's just a demarcation, yes, but it also points to the number of flights. So from a safety data analytic perspective, the more flights you have, the more likelihood you have to have certain incidents. So when you look at Africa, then it means the distribution is still very small. We have a lot of capacity to grow. But unfortunately, even as we grow, we will honestly just grow in those particular regions. So the growth will not be distributed equally across Africa as we would want. We hope that the certain, let me call it a mindset, the certain mindset will grow across so that distribution is even across Africa and we do have better safety performance. Just to chime in on collaboration, I think the responsibility is not just on the regulators or the operators. It's a very collaborative effort. I'll give an example of looking at it from a compliance perspective. So Kenya flies to almost 50 destinations in Africa. And the question is, when I go to those particular destinations, all my service providers have to have a certain safety mindset. And it is my responsibility as an airline to ensure that safety mindset is leaned upon those particular people that are my service providers. So if I say that I go to a certain country and I find that the ground handler, for example, is not teaching SMS, is it my prerogative to give them a finding and say, go and train SMS? Or should I collaborate with them and say, I am going to teach you SMS principles. I am going to teach you quality management systems. And I'll come and collaborate with you, safety and quality team, to check on you every so often to see whether you're meeting the safety targets. Now, if all airlines and operators took that mindset to say it is my responsibility across the continent, I think that cross-pollination and just planting a seed would ensure that safety in Africa grows exponentially.
Thank you. Thanks, Captain. Now, let me ask this. So now we have some countries doing fairly well, others not doing so well, and we have some in between there. We also have the Abuja safety targets, which were agreed a long time ago.
Yep.
And how are we doing as a continent towards achieving Abuja targets?
So on the
collective targets, isn't it?
Yes, the collective targets, unfortunately, we are behind. But like I said, the good thing is that we know where we are. It is very clear where we are vis-a-vis the targets. Yes, the targets have been revised, but when you look at each target, the one that would give the biggest impact is, for example, number 10, which says that require all African airlines to obtain IOSA or ESA certification. By then, it was by 2015. Now, of course, a lot of African airlines have moved towards that. IATA, AFRAA have actually invested in making sure that African airlines get towards that target. We know that the costs are very prohibitive for us to get there, and that's why AFRAA and IATA and Flight Safety Foundation are trying to bridge the gap. But you'll find that gives us a very holistic approach for where all operators are, and that will give us a benchmark, and it will now granulate some of the safety issues, and we're able to now say we need to work from here. When you look at things like aerodromes, unfortunately, those are the responsibility of governments when it comes to infrastructure. Now, infrastructure needs to grow and improve exponentially in Africa, because that is the catalyst to growth in aviation itself, and thereby catalyst to us growing from a safety perspective. So unfortunately, just like safety culture, we say that safety culture starts from the top. And when we say that loosely, we say that from an organizational standpoint. But I dare say that mindset also needs to start from the head of states, as an example, to push that safety culture and ensure that by them and governments buying into the safety targets through their CAAs, that these improvements are incrementally done. I'll just touch on those two, and Dr. Hassan can touch on the rest.
Yeah, Dr. Hassan, Abuja safety target. We know where we are as Africa, but is it good enough that we just know where we are?
I think that, as Captain said, there are certainly some areas that have improved, but as you know, there are several areas, goals within the AFI plan, including, very importantly, a sustainable safety oversight system. That cannot be overemphasized, because that is so important to have strong safety oversight by safety regulators. And so there is definitely room for improvement in that area. There has been some areas of deficiencies that have been identified and resolved, but many more still remain. And it is important to continue to really redouble our efforts to really focus on those and continue to make progress. You know, one of the things that has been highlighted in the ICAO report last year had to do with significant resource constraints. That is a challenge, as we have seen, and it's important to be able to really look at this in a very holistic way and find out if there are ways in which we can prioritize resources that really impact oversight capabilities, impact training and retention of qualified safety inspectors and personnel. I think that's going to be very important moving forward within the continent, to really come together and allocate resources so that we have good capacity, good oversight, good capabilities, good systems that we can really continue to make progress.
Yeah, thanks. I understand that, yeah, resource constraints, but there's the saying that if you want to go fast, walk alone. If you want to go far, walk with a group. Have we looked at some regional initiatives to sort of bridge the infrastructure gaps?
Well, there are several regional initiatives. Certainly IATA has been very active, as well as AFRAA, of course. You know, I would just point to the AFRAA Flight Safety Foundation roadmap that we established last year in Addis Ababa, coming together to focus on some of these challenges. And that's an example of a regional initiative collaboration. And so I encourage more of those collaboration organizations coming together, developing these roadmaps, and continuing to make progress.
So, Captain, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, so we know that 2023 CASIP was launched. That's the Collaborative Aviation Safety Improvement Program. And the role of CASIP was really to accelerate safety in Africa. And it's just to have difficult conversations amongst the stakeholders and say, okay, so what are the issues? What do we need to do quickly? What are the quick wins? What will take some time? And how do those parties within CASIP use their muscle in the industry to make sure that this happens a bit quickly? As the incoming AFRAA safety chairman, again, is to have conversations within AFRAA and say, okay, as AFRAA Airlines, if we agree that we will head towards a certain direction that we all agree, and of course, our CEOs being at the forefront of this, by them making the same commitment, then we start to see some incremental growth. So we're doing it, in Kenya, we call it from the bottom up, and we want that to really, those two initiatives as one of the bigger ones that we have within Africa to really leap us forward and ensure that we get to our destination as quickly as possible. So the rallying call is really for us to participate, to give our input. As I said, there's a lot of safety expertise in Africa in general, and I think we are the ones who know where the shoe pinches, and we are the ones who are going to give solutions to the problems in Africa. We can say that people from outside the continent, even as we collaborate, will tell us where the solutions lie. If we are honest with ourselves as Africa itself and say, okay, who is at the forefront? And we ask them really, how did you get here? And what can we do? What is the easiest way? Sometimes I say that you look at your brother struggling, and instead of holding their hand and lifting them up, either you end up laughing at them or just ignoring them. But it's really for the people who are ahead, those with better safety performance in Africa, those civil aviation authorities that are far ahead should really carry their brothers, of course, through AFCAC, and just see how we can get ahead.
But Captain, I recall that there are some sub-regional organizations which were formed largely with the purpose of actually working on the regional safety initiatives. One of them is at ECOWAS is called the Bagasso. And then under EAC, I think there's CASOA.
That's right.
How are these organizations and their likes in other parts of the region bringing the states together to address some of the safety issues?
So they exist, honestly. So we'll say they do exist. But why we know that regional collaboration works, if you look at South America, for example, there's another regional collaboration in the Middle East. They are very effective. And I've sat with one of them and asked them, why are you this effective? I think it is the buy-in from their leadership to say that this is important to us. And we are not just meeting. Sometimes in Africa, we say that you are very brilliant people in government, and you take technocrats into government, and you wonder what happened to the technocrat once they entered government. And that's just because that's where very good policy papers go to die. So we will have a lot of effort trying to come up with initiatives. But when you look at the implementation, so our documentation is brilliant. When you look at the implementation and the will to actually sit down and have these difficult conversations, form the working groups, and measure our performance incrementally, that is what I think is lacking. And we need, as Africa, to really, and of course, under the regional groups, to really sit down together and claw the steps incrementally as we go along, just to make sure that we're able to say we are better this year than we were last year. So unfortunately, we are not collaborating that closely as we should. It's just what it is.
And what can we do to improve this collaboration? Because we definitely need it, especially as we are not all equally endowed. And our problem is always the weakest link. So unless we all pull in the same direction and hold hands, the weakest link will always give us the bad name. Dr. Hassan, how can we pull along in the same direction? What do you think?
Yes, no, I think it's a very, very good question. I'm not sure if I have the answer to this, but I do agree that there are definitely efforts that are going on within the continent, as Captain Haig mentioned, but they're not always connected. And so it is important that we actually connect these efforts to make sure, as you said, we're rowing in the same direction. I would just emphasize one thing now, and maybe I can talk about it later, but one of the important Abuja targets is having a strong state safety program and SMS, and not only by regulators, but also by service providers. We know where those deficiencies are. We know where some of those needs are. And I agree with Captain Haig, those that have strong programs, those that have already plowed that path and have made progress can definitely lend a helping hand and be able to provide that expertise, provide that support to those that need some additional help to get over the goal line. So I think those are some opportunities that exist, and I believe we can do it. I believe that it's possible to come together to really push some of these over the goal line.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor, for that. Ladies and gentlemen, as the discussion unfolds, please, if you have any questions, use the Q&A tab. If it is a comment, please post it on the chat box, and I will review them at some point during these discussions. But let us move on a little bit. From the discussions we've had so far, I get the impression that safety is not just getting it right. It must be imbibed into the culture of an organization. It must be imbibed into the mindset of the individuals within that organization. And like Captain mentioned earlier on, he said, safety is the license to operate. And so if it is your license to operate, what you expect is that, look, your people must think, dream, sleep, eat safety. Now, how do we get or build, let me say, how do we build the right safety culture? Captain, let me start with you.
Thanks, Raphael. That's a very difficult question to answer. And that's because when I usually talk about safety culture, I have to take you back to where we are as a continent. And here I'm talking about just a basic culture when it comes to safety. If I ask Dr. Hassan today, has he ever gotten on a motorbike without a helmet? His answer will be, I have never done it in my life. And if you ask him why, he's probably going to tell you because it is unsafe. If you asked him, has he ever run a red light? He'll probably say, I have not. Why? Because it is unsafe. And of course, that's just because there are consequences to doing some of these things. Now, riding without a helmet in Africa is our basic way of movement from point A to point B. That is just how we get around, unfortunately. And from a pillion passenger on a motorbike going from point A to point B, he doesn't have a problem from a mindset perspective about this is unsafe. Now, guess what? These are the same people who come into the aviation space, and we expect them to be magically safe from a mindset perspective. So, and unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because we have a bigger step to get to where others are. And now when you start to compare regional performance when it comes to safety, it is very different. So it is very easy for us to overload an aircraft in Africa. And it's from a mindset perspective, it's not very easy for you to do that in other particular continents, either because of culture, because of the mindset around consequences, mindset around personal responsibility. So the conversation here is for us to change our mindset, then we really need to do a lot of training, mind shift change. More or less, it's removing the brain that you have and putting in another brain. Because we can say safety starts from the top. We can say that our leaders need to talk and preach safety. That's all and good. But remember, there's a cultural reset that we need to have as Africa. And this just comes by having very difficult conversations and saying, okay, fine, as Africans, this is us. We know that there are some things that we do that may not be safe. And when you try and mix that together with aviation, we know that aviation is a very unforgiving industry. So for now, where we are, as we try and reset our mindsets with people who are in touch with aviation, we also need to get our leaders to commit. And this is not just a commitment by signing a safety policy and saying that I commit to have a strong safety culture, but it's also for them to drive it. We need to see that our leaders are very visible, just like we see Dr. Hassan Shahidi is very visible, and he talks about safety all the time. Yes, this is a commercial bit, and we also need to say that safety enables economic growth within the aviation sector. But our leaders need to visibly come out and say that we are in support of these initiatives. We are going to provide the resources, we're going to provide the manpower for safety to ensure that we grow. Back to you, Rafael.
Yeah, thank you very much, Captain. Dr. Hassan,
if I can add,
this is actually going to be very difficult. Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me. Yes, so Dr. Hassan, I'm saying this is really, the picture Captain has painted is really a difficult one. So in fact, to really get it right means we actually have to do a lot of not only retrofitting, but in some cases, we need a replacement of the brain, and we need an overhaul of our cultural and our environmental setup. What do you think? How do we get around now ensuring that we're getting closer? I know we're doing the best we can. Otherwise, we would not be attaining the levels of safety we are doing today. And like I said at the beginning, some of our countries have actually even surpassed some other countries in the first world in terms of our standard. But it means this is a big struggle.
Yes.
How do we get a rate along?
No, Captain Haig outlined some of the issues, and I would just say this, that those challenges are not unique to Africa, okay? There are other regions that have similar challenges in terms of mindset. So we know aviation is very unique. It's very, very precise in terms of the types of safety systems and safety mindset that we need to have. So certainly, the workforce that's coming into this industry certainly will need support and training and things like that. And that's true for all regions, not just Africa. So I just want to emphasize that. Now, I think there are some things that can be done. And Captain Haig mentioned leadership, and I would like to emphasize that. And the foundation has been talking about safety leadership culture. And leadership doesn't just mean at the top, because leadership happens across the organization, at all levels of the organization. And so the leadership commitment and the messaging that all of us are doing, I think needs to happen on a regular basis about safety. That will have a significant impact across the organization, whether it's government, whether we're talking about airlines, industry. I think that messaging is so important, and we, the foundation, have been focused on safety leadership messaging. And we're working with our partners like AFRAA and others to really continue to emphasize that. The second thing I think that is going to be important is in safety systems is reporting cultures. And we know that reporting culture is so important because we know many things happen in operations. Captain Higgs knows very well about incidents or issues that happened that employees can see every day, but they need to feel safe to report those issues, whether errors or some mishaps. I think the more we can instill that type of culture of reporting, that is going to enhance our system. Because what if we don't know something that happens, we cannot really address it. So I think that's going to be important. That messaging is also important to come from leadership. And of course, training and education, that's an ongoing thing. And then reinforcing safety as a core organizational value. Rafael, we've talked about this before in our forums. Value, organizational value. It's not something that we do on the side, but it's really organic and a fabric of our systems and our operations. And if we can reinforce that, if we can educate on that, I think that will go a long way.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. At this point, let me go and we review some of our comments and questions from our audience. My friend Tom Cook says he's offering some source of knowledge. He says, to assist with mindset, as Captain Haig said, consider enrolling in aeronautical knowledge for safety course, currently free because of sponsorship by Airbus, ATR, and Boeing. So for the technical people who are here, or for the airlines that are here, and might want to carry this information to your technical people and to your people generally, because as we're talking about safety, it's not only about the technical people, but everybody within the organization need to have an appreciation of safety. And since this course is available for free, please consider subscribing to it. The name of the course again is Aeronautical Knowledge for Safety. Aeronautical Knowledge for Safety. And if you need further information and you cannot reach Tom Cook, just reach through the AFRAA Secretariat and we'll get further details for you. Tom has actually provided his organization's link there for members to look at. Now, there's Vivek Mittal is asking, what are the biggest, he says, what are the 3 biggest challenges with reference to safety between airlines and airports? What are 3 most urgent initiatives that are needed? So first, what are the biggest challenges? And 2, what are the urgent initiatives that we need to look at between airlines and airports? I don't know who wants to go first.
Dr. Hassan.
Doctor?
I will go first, and Captain Haig will certainly augment. I would just say one area that is going to be important moving forward is the role of infrastructure in Africa and infrastructure and safety. This is nothing new, but it is something that absolutely is a big challenge. Infrastructure is not just runways. It's about our data systems that we have. It's about air traffic control systems, our training centers, so important as part of infrastructure. Maintenance facilities are so important. This is all part of infrastructure. And so, underinvestment that we've seen in airport systems and navigational aids, that's so important for navigating across the continent. It's going to really be important, and there's risk if we don't make some significant progress there. There's technology such as ADSB systems out there that they're being adopted, and we need to accelerate those systems. And certainly, as we begin to look at these kinds of challenges, what else can we do with respect to safety systems that need to be built together across airlines, ANSPs, airports, and regulators together in unison?
Okay, so Captain, before you come in, if you can just combine it with this, somebody is, Stefan Colombia is asking, what is your viewpoint in terms of big data and modern data platforms that can enhance aviation safety for airlines operating in Africa, considering challenges such as limited infrastructure, diverse regulatory environment, and variable data availability? So yes, Dr. Hassan mentioned infrastructure as one of the key areas to be looked at. Now, big data, is it something that we could look at as a way of addressing some of the challenges in safety?
Yeah, so for me, the three areas, and it's funny that they were the same as Dr. Hassan, so infrastructure, technology, and oversight. I'll talk about the data. We suffer from lack of data, and now that data analytics is becoming a very big thing. It is already a big thing, but in the advent of artificial intelligence, it means with the big data, we are now able to have faster insights when it comes to the analytics part. And now with a click of a button, you're able to have very big packets of data analyzed and output in a sense that now it helps us to make decisions quickly. In aviation and when it comes to safety, the faster we are able to make decisions, then the better for us. We can be a bit more agile as organizations or as people in the aviation space, and that will help us to leapfrog when it comes to safety. We don't share data in Africa enough, and that's just because our data structures may be fragmented here and there. We also don't have very strong regulation when it comes to how we approach data. You do find that some states are very strong and have moved ahead even with regulations around data. You find that some CAs in Africa are now talking about data and the use of data, and some CAs now, service providers are supposed to feed that data back into the CA, and that helps the CAs with performance-based oversight. So we are not just saying that the CA is going to come to service providers and paint all of you with a brush, but they're painting all of us with a risk view and saying, based on this data that you've put into our system, we've analyzed and said that your risk profile is X, and we're going to oversight you based on that risk profile. Now, that helps us because when it comes to capacity building, you're not treating your 200 AOCs, your 200 ground handlers in your particular country with the same light. You're now able to segregate them based on risk, based on the activities that they are carrying. And the only way to head in that direction is data. Now, that journey, not being an easy one, requires a very big investment when it comes to training, capacity building on how we think about data. I'd also like to touch on the first question around some of the challenges, and I'll say security. A lot of times as safety people, when we think about safety, we don't think about security, but to me, it is one and the same. If you're not secure, then of course you're not safe, right? So when Dr. Hassan talks about infrastructure from a security perspective, for us to be able to protect our assets, protect our passengers, because remember, at the end of the day, we are all trying to prevent an incident or an accident that changes people's lives, either through people losing their lives or being permanently disabled. That's on the extreme side, and that's at the end of the day what we're trying to prevent. So if our airports are not secure from an infrastructure perspective, then that becomes very difficult for us to leapfrog in safety, because as we try and protect ourselves from a security perspective, that slows down how much traffic flows, that slows down how much investment other airlines can make. And when you look at it from a security risk assessment, other airlines from outside the continent could say, oh, well, we don't think that airport is secure enough, and hence it's not safe enough, and we are not going to fly to those particular destinations. And that ends up curtailing your economic growth as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for those responses. We have so many questions coming in. Unfortunately, we only have 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and we might not be able to touch all of it, I'm afraid. But if you can briefly respond to this, I'm not too sure whether you have the answer, but Emerson wants to know, we have so many civil aviation authorities across the continent, and are there any initiatives to harmonize the safety regulations across the continent? What are the challenges? If you have any thoughts briefly, then we can go back and conclude and then come back to the rest of our questions if time permits.
So just quickly, the idea is there, through regional collaboration and for us to have a Pan-African accountability framework with CAAs, of course, through AFCAC and other bodies. It is there for us to harmonize our regulations, and that will allow initiatives like SATAM and safety oversight to be very seamless. So it is there. We haven't made any very tangible steps or progress with it. But I know the idea exists, and we do hope that this idea actually comes to implementation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, I want us to touch on something which is equally very critical in the safety space, and this is actually about capacity. I know that oftentimes we lack the human resource capacity, but we talked about other resources that we lack and the need for those that are making progress to pull others along. But in terms of human resource, what can we do to improve the human resource capacity on the continent, especially in the area of safety? Dr. Hassan.
Well, it is definitely a challenge, again, not just in Africa, but across the board in terms of human resources. We're going to be needing many skills: air traffic controllers, pilots, cabin crew, maintenance technicians, dispatch, inspectors. So we in Africa are going to need to anticipate what is going to be needed, because we're building for the future, we're building for growth, and in order for that to happen, we need to have that capacity. I believe we need to look at the next generation. Captain Haig mentioned that earlier about attracting the new generation to this industry. And so it is going to be important to work across the continent, the government, industry, to look at the next generation, to attract them to industry, because we're competing with other industries. Aviation sector is competing with other industries, and young people in Africa are smart, they are educated, they are ambitious, and we need to redouble our efforts to attract them, to tell them about aviation and opportunities that it brings. And I believe if we can do that collectively, by bringing government, industry together and attract them, that will go a long way to have skills that are going to be needed in the next 5, 10, 15 years. We need to be thinking long-term. And I think it's going to require investment in capacity and training, and it has to be organic within the continent. Outside organization can certainly assist and help, but at the end of the day, it is going to be essential that organically within the continent, we build the capabilities and the capacities that are going to be self-sustaining moving forward.
Thank you. Captain, there's always, they say that, yeah, we have the resource, young, vibrant, brilliant population, very desirous to learn, but we also hear about some people who have gone to school, they've either gone to piloting school, have come out as young pilots, but they cannot find airlines. We've got engineers who have come out, they cannot find spaces to actually practice their skill and gain the experience. What can we do?
I think it is true that we do have a lot of capacity that could be coming out of schools. As airlines, we also do have safety that we're looking at. So you'll find a lot of airlines will say, I will not hire anyone that does not have 1,500 hours for a pilot, as a good example. Now, the question the budding pilots will ask, how do I bridge from 200 hours to 1,500 hours? I need to find somewhere to capacity build those hours so that I am eligible to join the airlines. And it is a balance. It is a very delicate balance, because from an airline perspective, then we're also looking at risk. Are we saying that this person who is straight out of school, do we throw him into a Boeing 737 and I'm comfortable sleeping at night that the flight is safe? So a lot of perceptions out there when it comes to risk, and you'll find that's possibly the answer why we are unable to pick pilots straight from school, throw them in a jet and move on. However, some organizations across the continent, we know that they have pilot programs that are able to bridge that gap between the two. Of course, at my airline at Kenya Airways, then we are able to bridge anyone that comes out of school and induct them into flying a jet. Now, airlines have to make that commitment to do the same for pilots, for engineers, for ground staff, for anyone who desires to get into aviation, that there's a path from school into the airline. And we have largely been successful when it comes to personnel who are going into passenger handling, engineering, dispatchers, and pilots, that there's a way for our young people to get into aviation. Now, of course, that mindset is not across the continent, but it is one of the quick wins when it comes to capacity building within the airlines.
Thank you. So our time is up. We overshot by 2 minutes, but I cannot let you go until both of you have given me an indication of how we can ensure that safety-wise, Africa pulls all countries along so that no country is left behind, in the words of ICAO. How do we ensure that in the area of safety going forward, no country is left behind? Captain, starting with you.
No country left behind is a very integral part of safety, because we don't fly within our country. When you look at Kenya from an international perspective, there are only 2 airports I can fly to as Kenya Airways, which have the infrastructure to hold the aircrafts. Will I make money from those 2 airports? No. And that means for us to be sustainable economically, then I have to fly outside my country to other airlines. Now, for that to grow from an African perspective, then we need to collaborate a bit more. We require a Pan-African mindset when it comes to aviation, looking at where the strengths and where there are weaknesses and where we can pull each other up, because that at the core of being an African is something that we believe in, pulling your brother up from where they are, not leaving them to the elements. But collaboration for us is very, very key. I think I cannot overestimate collaboration, because safety is not just an operational imperative, it is an economical one, and every step we make towards safety unlocks trades, tourism, connectivity. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Hassan, you have your last word. How do we make sure all countries move along?
What else I can add to what Captain Haig already mentioned? First of all, this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think the future is bright, and there are challenges, and we can overcome them. Advancing aviation safety in Africa, as we've discussed, really is a collective commitment to fostering, a safety culture, a robust safety culture, investing in infrastructure, and of course, as Captain Haig mentioned, really continue to enhance collaboration among all stakeholders across this industry. And so by embracing these principles, we can really pave the way forward for a safer and more resilient system in Africa. And so if there are three things that we can say: collaboration, capacity building, and believing in the next generation that come in and really move Africa into the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan. Can you, if you can just take a minute and just tell us a bit more? I'm told there's a joint summit coming on in Kigali sometime in May, jointly organized by Flight Safety Foundation and AFRAA. Can you tell us briefly what that will be about?
Yes, this is the second African Aviation Safety and Operations Summit. It's a joint effort by AFRAA and Flight Safety Foundation. It is going to be held in Kigali, May 13 through 14. And the theme of it is strengthening safety culture for resilient aviation in Africa. And it is going to be an exciting event. The registration is open, so I encourage everybody who has not yet registered, register for this. It's going to be an interactive engagement. Industry, government will come together to discuss many of these issues in more detail, and there will be a lot of good information and takeaways for professionals, for operators, for regulators to really learn from this. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody there.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, this is where we draw the curtains on today's discussion. I thank you very much for your active participation, especially for those whose questions I could not take, or comments I could not read out. I note in particular Tillman, Mwanzia, Gladwell, Rosemary, Papa Atoman, and Sheikh Tesiso. I'm so sorry I could not we could not respond to your questions, but I do appreciate your participation and asking those questions. We hope that next time when we have the opportunity, we would be able to dwell a bit more on the questions rather than on our Q&A, and so that we can answer more of yours. But on your behalf and on behalf of AFRAA, allow me to thank Dr. Hassan for doing a great job, a fantastic job in helping us understand and appreciate safety on the continent. Also, allow me to thank Captain Haig, who has clearly brought to the fore some of the critical safety issues that we need to undertake and work on jointly so that this continent can move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, until next month, when we bring you another edition of AFRAA Skyconnect, this is from me to you, and I wish you a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you very much for coming. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.